Good morning. It's Thursday, October 22nd. Thank you for joining. This is the Sociality Squared weekly Facebook Live Director's Cut series, where I discuss things that we create at Sociality Squared and commentary on social media news and trends. Today, we're going to be talking about how to add voice to your current social media marketing, so stay tuned. Thank you for joining. I know that there's a million things going on right now, so I appreciate you watching this, whether you're doing it live or after the recording. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I'm here in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the numbers in the county are the highest since the pandemic started. So I know there's pandemic fatigue. We're all sick of social distancing, wearing masks, and the like. But we do need to stay vigilant and stay safe. And we've lost over 220,000 people in the United States, and the projections are not looking good. So my heart is with your heart, and my heart is especially with the Black community right now. Here at Sociality Squared, we don't want business to return back to normal. We want a new standard rooted in anti-racism and radical inclusion and equality. So if you don't know who I am, I'm Helen Todd, co-founder and CEO of Sociality Squared. And if you're new to Sociality Squared, we're a social media agency that understands the magic of people coming together around what they value and love. And businesses partner with us to grow their businesses and know that we always remember behind every screen is a person. So in the live video, there's ways that you can connect with me. I'm Helen's Travels on Twitter and Instagram, and links to sign up for the company newsletter. It's only monthly, and it's a great roundup. And then also links where you can connect with us on social. And if you like our Facebook page, you'll get notified when I go live every Thursday morning at 8 a.m. So what we do with every broadcast, some news, the topic, and then some inspiration. So the biggest news, vote, vote, vote. Voting is underway right now. For I think some places you still can register to vote. We're less than 2 weeks to the end of the election. I can't emphasize this enough. Have a plan to vote. If you're registered to vote, make sure that it's still gone through. If there's tracking apps, make sure that your vote has been counted and selected. I was planning on voting earlier, but I'm actually doing my vote tomorrow and dropping my mail-in ballot directly to the election, council or whatever, here in Cincinnati. So vote, 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 vote. Sociality Squared is going to be closed on November 3rd in observance of Election Day, and just to encourage the team to vote and other companies and people in leadership positions to give their teams the day off to make it easier to vote as well. And then thank you for everyone who attended my Brandemonium presentation. That was 2 weeks ago. And actually what I'll be talking about today are some highlights about how to add voice to your social media marketing. Okay, so let's dive into the topic, and then I'll go over some news, some things that are in the headlines. Okay, so one thing that's really interesting about voice is there's a lot of voice tech happening right now, but one of the who's actually in our inspiration is Reeps One. That's his stage name. His name is Yeff. He's a beatboxer, and one of the interesting things with voice is while we're very forward thinking about all of the ways it can break down barriers for accessibility and opening up the possibilities of what this new interface that we can have with technology. But we still haven't actually pushed voice just as the human voice as far as it can go. And are still learning more things about this, old tool that we have as long as humans have been around. And Reeps One, this beatboxer, is like really pushing the boundaries of the human voice and what it can do. and an institution. He lives in the UK. A university there is actually studying his voice and how he manipulates sound and everything. So I think it's really interesting that even though we think about voice, at least in the tech world, in a very future forward way, I think there, or a technologist futurist way, there's still so much that we can do just with our own human voices. And I watched, because I do speak, when it's not COVID, on stages and stuff. So I've taken some training on how to present on stage. And there was one really good video that I watched that we breathe our thoughts, and you can tell so much about in our voices and how we communicate. What our emotions and thoughts and state of mind are. So the voice is this very intimate tool that we have that expresses so much. And when we bring technology into it, we're putting earbuds in our ears, our speakers, and we're having people's voices like directly in our ears, which Amel, who has a podcast, has pointed out of like how valuable that is, that when podcasters are trusted to have that intimate relationship. But the other really cool thing with Reeps One, on like the taking this old tool that we have of the human voice and then pushing it not only with his own vocal cords and body, but with tech. He's partnered with Nokia Bell Labs and all these other organizations, and is creating like voice AI sculptures where he makes sounds, and then each sound like represents another structure in this 3D thing. He's also like collaborated with AI, where the AI will take his voice and then remix it, so that he's actually beatboxing with himself and hearing new sounds. So that's really interesting, what he's doing, and I definitely encourage you to follow his Instagram account. Now, in terms of like how most marketers can integrate voice into their social media marketing, we don't need to be collaborating with AI to remix sounds for the bulk of where we sit right now in social media marketing. There's a lot of ways where you can layer in voice to what you're already currently doing without having to like create a new channel or have like a massive added workload to what you're doing. In general, like this is more of like an add-on where it's a little bit more work, but you get a lot more benefits. So and this is one thing I pointed out in the presentation too, that I will also remind everyone here before I go into like how to layer it. There's a few other things that I want to point out about voice. One, from a branding perspective, if you don't have your brand voice defined and mapped out, this is like branding 101. You should definitely have that. If you haven't looked at it for a couple years, you should revisit it and make sure that it still works. If you don't have a brand voice or visual guide, reach out. This is what we do at Sociality Squared for our clients. We just launched a new client, which we're really excited about. And we developed all of their strategy, brand voice, visual, social guidelines, all the templates, the content calendar, and are doing all the management. So these are really like core tools in your social media marketing toolbox. The other really exciting thing about voice in a broader sense, and I kind of hinted at it, is how it breaks down the barriers for accessibility. So right now, a lot of people access, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, some people with visual impairments or blind actually like interface with the internet by screen readers, and they hear what's on the pages. And the approach is very much like separate but equal experiences, where websites have to be coded a specific way, which not all of them are, which is a problem, but need to be coded a specific way so that the devices actually know, like, hey, there's a button here, because they aren't seeing a mouse to click. They use the keyboard to navigate. But with voice, it's an equalizer where everyone gets the same experience. And it really is the interface of the future, and it's just a lot more accessible and inclusive, and opens up so many doors into how we'll be using tech in the future. And if you look at movies like or just sci-fi in general, it's like the line of sci-fi and reality are definitely blurring. If you look at the movie like Her, where he's talking with AI, that's not too far off from where we're at with I have Siri here, and these types of devices. And actually, I really loved Westworld. For any Westworld fans out there, whoever did their consulting on how they interacted with some of their devices, I thought was really good. Instead of like clicking and doing addresses on Google Maps, it would just, like, the person would talk to the computer of, like, show me this location and how to get there. So it was much more fluid, and we're already on the way on that path. So it's kind of interesting how the sci-fi and tech is merging, but mostly because I'm the most excited about it because of accessibility. My father, before he passed, had really bad arthritis, and typing for him was incredibly hard, especially on little phone keypads, buttons, whatever. I feel like I sound old. Him being able to talk and interact by voice would have opened up so many more opportunities for him to actually interact with tech. And in general, it's good for business. Accessibility is good for business too. 1 in 4 people in the U.S. has a disability. And a few statistics, 20% of the population has a disability that impacts their ability to interact with the web. And I think I've spoken before on this broadcast, or if I haven't, I'll do it again, about the importance of, or how to make just your social media strategy more accessible in general. 8.1 million people have a vision impairment, and 7.6 million people have a hearing impairment. And on the hearing side, that's why closed captions, one of the reasons why they're really important, in addition to user behavior of, regardless of your hearing ability, people listen or interact on their devices with the sound off. Okay, so the power of voice technology is really exciting from an inclusivity part. Okay, so how can you incorporate voice into your social media marketing without, doing a ton of crazy work? Like, how do you incorporate it in your current content strategy? A few ideas. One is you can add audio to your blog posts or articles that you're publishing. There's a few examples, and they're actually linked in the description, that I've seen that are really interesting. And we've already, with the internet and all these social media platforms, have kind of seen the democratization of how people interact with brands and publications. It's not enough for a brand to have just a website. They have to meet their customers and consumers where they're at. So if the consumers are on Pinterest, you go to Pinterest. If your consumers are on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, you set up a presence there. And in addition to this, like, democratization of, platforms, and giving the choice to consumers to interact with you on their platform of choice, we're also kind of seeing this emergence of the democratization of the consumption of content. So you have a blog post. Does the person want to read it? Do they want to watch video? Do they want to listen to it? So now it's like giving our viewers choice on how they're actually consuming the content in the different ways. And one of the easiest ways to do this is with your blog posts, in terms of If you read it, you can audio record it and have a little listen. SoundCloud is great for that in terms of easily uploading audio and then being able to embed it. You can also turn those types of things into podcasts, although I don't know if that was the best podcast strategy. But you could also, if you have a video series, we love video content because you can start with the video, transcribe the video. Otter.ai is one of my favorite tools for transcription, which is linked below. Take the transcription, turn it into a blog post. The long form copy needs to be edited. Don't just do the transcription. And then you can also scrape the audio and then embed that too. So if you start with video and whatever, if you have video already in your content strategy, it's probably the easiest way to then repurpose the video in multiple ways. We talk a lot about like milking content and using it a lot of different ways, where you embed video on your blog, share it on your social channels, cut it vertical and square. But you can also like actually reuse the content within the video in terms of scraping it for its audio and embedding that and transcribing the what's said and turning it into editing it for a blog post. And there's a couple of really good examples where the New York Times, which this is linked below, has articles. You can either read it, or if you prefer to listen to it, you can do that. I don't think they do this for every article, but they've started testing it. Oh, sorry, that's my phone. I should have turned off beforehand. And then The Verge actually did a really interesting article on Zuckerberg, where there was leaked audio tapes, and as you're reading it, where they quote Zuckerberg, you can actually listen to it. So it just makes for a richer experience, where as you're like reading an article that's quoting someone, that you actually hear the voice of the person as they're saying the quote. So it's really powerful in terms of like, one, bringing credibility to the quote, like kind of bridging that imagination of how does this person sound as they're saying it. And then I guess third is also a term that is being thrown around as like multimodal, like consuming content through different modes of communication. So you're literally listening and reading at the same time. So it's a really rich experience. And then another post that I linked to is Maria Folio, I think is how you say her name. Her blog post is a really good example of where she has a podcast that she turns into a video, which is embedded. You can view the transcription, you can listen to it, then she has like a summary post in it. So it really brings all of the different ways that you can consume this content, and let the user like decide, do they want to read the summary and the key points? Do they want to listen or watch the whole thing? So that's definitely like ways that you can incorporate voice now. Other ways, you can launch a podcast. I would say podcasts are a lot of work, but similar to video, we love podcasts here at Sociality Squared because they're a great content engine. If you have a podcast, double it as a video, or have a video that you then turn in, scrape the audio for a podcast. This is great content engine that can really, the social media editorial calendar kind of writes itself when you have a content series like that. Blog posts too are just great long form content. But when you have like audio and video, it just adds so much more of a rich experience in different content, media types for people to use. Oh yeah, one of the things that you can try, although I haven't really seen it too much, is that you can try voice messages. I know that there's a trend with this. I do it with some of my friends, that instead of leaving a voicemail, which who does that anymore, that instead of a text messages, you just record your voice really quick, send that as an audio clip, and then your friend can reply by text or reply by audio message. So brands actually have the ability to do this on Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp, but I would say proceed with caution. If you guys didn't see the clip with Jimmy from LinkedIn, very sweet gentleman who left a voice message to someone who just accepted his connection on LinkedIn. She found it kind of funny, tweeted about it, and then it blew up. Because it's so new and kind of unexpected, where people are like, why is this brand or why is this person sending me a voice message? So I would say test, proceed with caution, and do it very thoughtfully of explaining why you're doing it. Because we here at Sociality Squared, we always talk about, wanting to share content and publish content in the culture of the platform and kind of what people are expecting to get and consume. Since these audio messages are kind of like new in general and specifically not used from brands, like it's either you have first mover advantage or it's going to be kind of weird. So if you do it and want to test it, which I highly encourage, always testing and throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks, make sure that you do it thoughtfully or clever to where it makes sense while you're sending these video messages. And of course, like when we're talking about voice, you want to use, before I go into that, a few other things like test Spotify ads. That's another way to incorporate voice, podcast ads, and like traditional radio ads. These are just kind of the extension of radio ads. So those are a couple ways to incorporate voice. I would say my biggest recommendation is if you have a blog, or if you don't have a blog, do a video series and scrape the audio, or do a podcast and scrape the audio and repurpose that content a lot of different ways. If that sounds like too much, if you have a blog, you can audio record yourself reading some of the reading the blog, or hire a voice actor to read it and have the ability for people to either listen or read it. But I think you'll get a bigger bang for your buck doing a video series or a podcast series. And video is so easy to do. I mean, you literally, I'm going live, you push a button and you're live. So in terms of like biggest bang for your buck, I would probably say video and live video, because the production costs are very accessible in that regard. And as we're talking about voice, I always have to remind everyone, you have your own voice and to use it. And as I said earlier in the broadcast, the most important voice where we're all equal is when we vote. So definitely vote, vote, vote. You also have a voice within your companies. You have a voice with your consumer dollars of what you choose to spend. So definitely use your voice. I could talk about that as a whole other broadcast, but take anything away, add voice to your social media marketing strategy, use your own voice, and definitely vote. So links are in the description of some of these tools. We only have a few minutes left. I kind of already mentioned the inspiration. I did want to talk about two news topics. One I meant to talk about last week, and the social media dilemma kind of took over. So if you haven't seen that movie, I recommend it. And after you've watched it, or if you've already seen it, you can listen to last week's broadcast where I kind of talk about, some of the things that stood out to me about it. So on October 12th, Facebook announced that they are changing their policy about Holocaust deniers. For a really long time, they allowed, basically since 2009, Holocaust deniers to spread content on Facebook. And their reasoning was that this was an example of how they supported the First Amendment. Turns out that there's actually been like a rise in anti-Semitic violence. And due to this real world violence happening because of the content that's being consumed and shared, Facebook has reevaluated the policy and put it under hate speech. In general, it should have been hate speech from the outset and never allowed. And I think in general, what we're kind of seeing is very broad policies of these like protections of the First Amendment, and then like seeing them backfire in real world violence, whether it's the Christchurch in New Zealand, which that person was radicalized online, whether it's this anti-Semitism that's resulting in, you know, not only hate speech but hate crimes, and then the platforms changing course. It would be nice if it didn't actually take real world horrific violence at the cost of human lives to actually do the right thing from the outset. And I think this is something from a regulatory sense that one person, like Mark Zuckerberg, has way too much power and is deciding what is free speech and what is not free speech. One person who has billions of people using their content or using their platform and consuming content should not be deciding solely like whether this is allowed or not allowed. So it opens up kind of a lot of issues in terms of how these things are happening. And the other thing too, around the First Amendment and these platforms, specifically within Facebook, they have issues with I think Mark Zuckerberg actually has some bad people, or not bad people, but people giving him bad advice on how to approach some of this First Amendment stuff, specifically with right-wing media. Because there's tactics in the media manipulation where you have far right or right-wing media outlets that will make a big deal and get press about social media platforms prioritizing or surfacing democratic or not democratic left content more. It's not the case. Some of the top content off of Facebook is like Fox News. But because they make a big stink about it, the platforms like actually overcompensate and like, no, we're definitely let right-wing voices and, you know, freedom of expression. And you see this in instances where, you know, they let Holocaust deniers happen so long that they put Breitbart News on as an official news publication to overcompensate. But it's a right-wing tactic that gets the platforms. And there was an article recently that Mother Jones was actually, which is more of a left site, downgraded, and the right-wing sites were given more distribution on Facebook for this exact reason, so that the platforms are like, look, you know, right-wing, you know, we're giving you extra stuff, which then actually becomes imbalanced and not right. But in addition to like the media manipulation and right-wing tactics to manipulate platforms to do this overcompensation, Facebook does have some people internally that, even though they are a Silicon Valley company and a lot of the employees probably do lean more left, they do have a lot of, or not a lot, but some key people inside that are very right and pushing right. I forget the gentleman's name who's in DC, but you also have Peter Thiel on the board. So anytime you hear that Facebook is more left, that is not the case. But in general, so that's a few different topics, but one, hate speech, you know, it shouldn't take real world violence to have policies to proactively prevent this on that end. We need regulation so one person isn't deciding what the First Amendment is, and we need more digital literacy around just understanding media manipulation in general, for the platforms, and then people consuming the content. Like, it was really a striking piece that I think it was like 18 to 24-year-olds, a lot of them like are questioning whether the Holocaust happened or not, which is a shame, not only for the platforms, but for our education institutions, and probably opens up a can of worms for some bigger issues. And then the other big news in the tech world is Google is getting hit with an antitrust lawsuit. We'll see what happens with this after all the hearings and investigation. This could be, one of the biggest things in the antitrust legal world in a long time in the tech world. So definitely something to keep our eyes on. I haven't fully read through all of the articles, but definitely something that to pay attention to. So right at 30 minutes or 31 minutes. So I'll leave you with a quote from Reeps One, or a few quotes. I'm a really big fan. So I recommend watching the Nokia Bell Lab series. It's like a mini online video series called We Speak Music. And it profiles Harry and what he's doing as a beatboxer, some of his youth outreach, and there's a really great episode where you see him going to a university and actually being studied, and like you can actually see like through an MRI like how fast his like tongue moves as he's like making these sounds, which some people have never even heard before, because he's pushing the voice that much. So really, really interesting and fascinating guy, and what he's doing with his voice and what he's doing with voice and tech. So I recommend that series. So that's linked below. Follow him on Instagram. He posts about his latest projects of voice sculptures and all these other things. But here are a few quotes to end. Let's see. You have to. He's very much the creative too. You have to have a foundation in something, a discipline. You have to push that as far as you can. Everyone who thinks of himself or herself as a creative must look at new ways of exploring what they do. This is what true intelligence is, I think, trying to connect the dots that haven't been connected before. And one of my favorite quotes from him is, "As our voices grow, we grow." So thank you for tuning in. Again, like this page if you haven't already, so that you see when I go live. I'll be back next Thursday morning at 8 a.m. With another topic. And if you haven't voted, vote, and sign up for our newsletter too. I think that will be coming out next week. Okay, stay safe, stay vigilant. Thank you.